And we're saying hello to two guys from FM on the Renaissance now with the new album Metropolis, and we welcome to a pub deep in the midst of Cheshire, which is happy stomping ground for the two guys. We say hello to Steve Overland and to Jim Kirkpatrick.
Hi there, how you doing?
Welcome
David?
to Get Ready to Rock.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations on the album Metropolis. You must be really made up that it's had such a great reaction.
Unbelievable, really. I mean, I think we didn't think we could come back with such an impact, really. When we first decided to do the one-off Firefest show that we did, it was just going to be one gig, and we were going to see what happened and see how we got on getting back together. I mean, we were apart for 10, 11 years, so you never know. I mean, we were expecting probably 200 people to turn up, and we sold it out, Rock City. So it's a fantastic night. And it all just went from there. We sort of saw the fans' reaction and nothing had changed really, so we thought, why don't we carry on with this? And then obviously Andy went, Jim came in, and we decided to do a new record. And it's just been moving very quickly, hasn't it really?
Well,
after
a slow start.
Really, all this is relative because you've actually been through this euphoria, haven't you, when an album's released back in the 80s?
Yeah.
Can you cast your mind back to the late 80s? I mean, was there one particular album which really had a buzz in the, for those of us who weren't there or are just catching up with FM, what was the album that really created the buzz for the band?
Well, to be honest, I mean, Toughen Out was the album really that launched us into probably, we were as big as we did a theatre tour, we did Hammersmith and all that, and headlined that on the back of that record because we were lucky enough to get some great tours. We did Bon Jovi tours and Tina Turner tours and all of those tours. So basically, we were taking fans away from people all the time. And the albums did very well in other countries like Japan and Sweden. But Toughen Out was the one that kind of made us as big as we were in the 80s, really, 1989. But once again, Indiscreet was really well received, the first album, because we were going to be, everybody predicted us to be the English Bon Jovi or the English Foreigner and all that at the time. So the first two albums were great. They both did really well for us.
Get Ready to Rock Radio.
Now, FM, was there ever a time, Steve, that you thought things weren't going to happen again for the band? I mean, what actually happened? I mean, it's probably well written, but basically, mid-90s, the band folded after an album.
Yeah. We got to this, we've been together for about 11 years, David, and we were still touring and doing sort of big club gigs. We were doing, we could still fill the gigs and we were doing well, but there didn't seem to be anywhere to go. Grunge had kicked in and we could make a living, but we just seemed to be on a parallel level. We couldn't go anywhere. There was nowhere to go. We'd made albums, we'd got big record deals, we'd been through all of that and done everything we could do really. And the last album we made together, Dead Man's Shoes, the writing didn't come very easily. It was becoming quite, obvious that it was time to stop. If you were honest with yourselves, and lots of bands carried on, and good luck to them, but we just thought, it's not going anywhere now, we need to call it a day now. We're all still friends, and we stayed friends through the 10, 11 years that we weren't together. So it was a good thing to stop it before it all became kind of, I could see it going nowhere at that time, because the music, we couldn't get it played on the radio, we couldn't do anything really, there was nowhere to go. So just musical trends. It was just the musical trends changed.
Yes, I mean, grunge does have a lot to answer for, doesn't it?
Well, some great bands came out of the grunge era,
but it did kill off a lot of melodic rockers yourselves, didn't it?
But to be fair, the last album we did last year was not one of our strongest records. So, if I was being totally honest with you, I think the songs were good, but I think I'd already written some songs for another project. People were starting to think of other things to do in the band. And it just got to the point where it seemed the right thing to do to stop,
Now, turning the clock back a little bit further, when the band started, was there one event, one aspect of the band's early career, if you like, where you can look back and think, well, actually, we got a right place, right time? I mean, were anything acting as like a catalyst in those early days? I mean, what got you the contract with, Columbia, wasn't it, through Portrait, and then it went to Epic?
That's right,
I mean, this was a major, and still is, a major name label.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
It was a funny thing how the band got together, really, because me and my brother were managed by a guy called Brian Lane, who managed Asia and Yes and all those bands, and we were doing work with people like Robin George and people like that and writing songs. And basically Pete phoned up one day and said, look, we got a couple of songs, want to put this band together. And so me and Chris had a meeting with them. So we sat down, me and Chris, and we said, right, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's do a couple of rehearsals. And so the band rehearsed and it sounded great. So we said, right, we'll write 4 songs and we'll do a showcase and see if it doesn't go anywhere, that's the end of it. That's it. We'll just go back to what we were doing. We were all on retainers from other things. You know, Pete was in Samson and we were all doing other things, but we wanted to get this band together just to try it. But the thing is, in the meantime, we were writing other tunes, and a tour came up with Meatloaf, and they heard the demos of the songs for Indiscreet, and the management of Meatloaf offered us the Bad Attitude tour in Europe. So we went to Germany before we got a record deal and did 6 or 7 dates in like these huge sports parlour places, where 2 or 3 labels saw us. So there was kind of a buzz going around on the labels when we came back to England about this new rock band, even though we'd done nothing really. We'd just done a few gigs with Meatloaf in Europe. Came back, we did 1 showcase, and actually I think the first time CBS came, we didn't hear anything back. And then all of a sudden 2 other record labels came in and offered us a deal. And as it goes, it sort of all of a sudden Portrait came from America to England, and we were the first signing. They came to us and said, look, fantastic, we did 1 more showcase, and that was how it all came about. Really, it was just like the band actually had a buzz. It was that whole thing of getting a buzz going, because all record companies are like, if somebody else is interested, then we're interested. That's how it works, you know, and that's how it went.
In the mid-90s, pretty much run its course and you went off doing other things, but would you say that there was an element of like perhaps label management at that time as well? I mean,
very much so, yeah. I mean, with Epic, it was amazing really, because we'd been on so many brilliant tours, and they put us on all these tours, and we kept saying, look, why are we going to these places? And because we had no real product to promote, but they just kept us touring and touring and touring, which maybe cost a fortune, but there was no reason to do a lot of it. And they kept trying to bring in people to write with us, which was great. It's a great experience writing with people like Desmond Child. It was fantastic, but it was kind of, we lost our way a bit with Epic, and we kept sort of every couple of sort of meetings we'd have with them, they'd put 2 songs forward of outside rights to try, and they had this thing where we need the hit single, and we thought we got the hit single, and you kind of sort of fishing in the dark. The American label wanted to take the band over. They loved FM and Epic in America, but the trouble is we were signed to Epic in the UK, and although they're the same label, they just battle against each other. You know, they don't work together. So I went to the States, me and my brother, and wrote with Desmond Child and did all these things in America, but the British label wouldn't let go of it.
I gather you didn't really have the wider success in the States that perhaps you should have had, really.
No, that was the biggest shock of all, really, to everybody. I mean, Frozen Heart came out, first single, Billboard tip sheets did really well. We thought it was going to do, but unfortunately it was definitely all about politics from the record label. We were booked to do about 3 tours out there, and at the last minute it all kicked off. It was purely a power game with a band caught in the middle. It was like we had, as I say, the American Epic, the English Epic. We were signed in England. Our publishing deal was signed in America with Chapel Music, so the Americans out there controlled the songs, but they didn't have the band on the American label. So it just became a big mess. I mean, I went out there a lot. I did a lot of writing out there. I wrote with Desmond, Jesse Harms. Chapel kept taking me out to meet people, and I went out and did promotional tours, but we never got any tours together because of this in-house fighting thing. And we didn't know what to do. We couldn't do anything about it. It was well above us, so we suffered. But you know, you just have to get on with it, don't you? You know, and I mean, it's not an easy business, and that's it. We just sort of ploughed on, and you know, went to places where we could go. But it is a shame, because obviously, if you listen to the music, it's so American orientated. Yes. It has that real crossover thing for the States. So it got a bit messy with Epic, really, in the end. And although they wanted to make a 3rd album, we went for a meeting with a guy that was a great guy, actually, called Gary Stevens. We just said, look, there's no point in making a 3rd. We owe you £1 million. You know, what's the point in making a 3rd album? You know. So we actually broke off the deal, and they let us go, and we went off and did a deal with somebody else, you know. But it was just that time when there was lots of money around in the business, and
Yes.
they would send you off to LA to do a video in a warehouse when you could have done it in Crewe, because it's in a warehouse, isn't it? You know, but it's like, no, you need to go to LA and do it. And you'd be like, right, okay, yeah, lovely. You know, you pack your case and you go, you know, and it was just, now in hindsight, you kind of look at the money you spent on ridiculous things, and you would never do that now. I mean, it's like, we know what we're trying to do, and we have control now, and that's the main thing, you know.
But it was a good time though for the industry, in the sense that there was money floating about, like you say.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was
the
fun.
whole idea of like picture discs and limited editions,
Yeah.
it was much more
It
thriving,
was very
wasn't
healthy,
it, really?
very
It was
healthy time, and fans could. There was so many, as you say, so many great packages, and they do like 5 different runs of a record. Want to be a box set, want to be a picture disc, and it was great stuff to collect.
Yes.
You know, and but it's all changed now, hasn't it? You know, but you know, it was good fun, but at the same time, you kind of could lose track quite easily on where you were going, and you just had money thrown at you from all directions, and it was sort of, yeah, we'll do that then, we'll do that, and at the end of the day, it was we wasted a lot of money.
Yes.
In the 80s,
So it
you
must
know.
be marvellous for somebody like you, Steve, from the 80s onwards, really. You've been through that experience, the money situation, and the classic time, really, I think, for melodic rock generally, was the late 80s, early 90s.
Definitely.
So how have you come to terms over the years? I mean, now you must, I mean, before the interview you were joking about, you know, you're not that keen on like emails and text messages and things. Just concentrate on the vocals, which is probably the best thing,
Yeah.
really. But I mean, how have you managed to adapt, you think, over the years yourself to the new business, if you like, the new business model?
Well, I think,
and I'm sure that's affecting Metropolis in its own way, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, the great thing is I surround myself with people that do understand the technology. I mean, I just write the songs and sing them, and it's like, you know, I know what the process is, but you still got the same thing where you use engineers. I don't engineer the albums. We have an engineer to do it because that's what they do well. But you have to look at the way the industry's changed, and you know, it's now not about going into a shop and buying an album. It's about downloads and stuff like that. There may be one song, whereas in our day it was like you wanted to own that album. The sleeve and everything was like a big part of it. The whole industry's changed now, and I think it used to be really tough to get to the entire world. Now you can do it at the drop of a hat. If you're doing a tour, you just on your website or put it wherever, and everybody knows about it. So you know, it's easier in a way. It's easier to get to people and let them know what you're doing. You know.
Now, did this whole way, new approach, if you like, the modern approach, did that colour the making of Metropolis, the album? I mean, was there any rejection of songs? You know, did you modify things? Did you think to yourself, well, when people are just snatching odd tracks, I mean, it does make you perhaps more focused on the tracks that you're including, doesn't it? Because for a whole album, I mean, I have to say it's a really strong album, and the beauty of it, I think, is that you can go back to it and discover new things, which has to be a good thing.
Yeah,
There's immediate
sure.
stuff, and I love Wildside, fantastic.
Yeah, I think the thing with us is, I mean, we kind of write. Everything we write has to have a commercial edge anyway. There's nothing that you could say, this is an album track. We don't do that, do we, Jim, really?
Well,
You know,
we tried not to. I mean, I think the biggest sort of criteria was that we knew it had to stand up with anything that had gone in the past, really.
Yeah.
It had to be as good as, if not better, if we could do that, really. You know, which is probably debatable whether we did or not, but I mean, there's certainly some stuff on there that stands up, I think, as good as anything that FM ever
Definitely.
recorded.
I would say the whole album does. I think it's definitely one of the best albums we've done. Song-wise, which is, you know, it's...
But again, you got the freedom that in the UK, we're the record company for the UK, so you haven't got anybody dictating to you what you've got to do. So hopefully we're kind of clever enough to know what we had to do.
I think we're good at our own quality control, aren't we? I mean, songs don't get past the first verse and bridge. If they're not right, they're not right. And we probably wrote...
And there were a lot of songs that didn't, didn't make it. There was probably 20 songs, wasn't there?
Yeah, easily, you know. So I think we are.
Yeah, easily, yeah.
We're realistic, I think, and we look at songs as, you know, I mean, if you look at, as you just said, David, they stand up on their own. Each song has to be a complete thing. It has to have... Melody's very important, and the qualities of the band are melody and harmonies and that kind of... That's what we look at. And so... I think every song is taken as a separate entity. It's not. We never think of, right, we got 8 good songs, so we only need another 3 to make an album, and these all do. That never ever comes into play. It has to be, every song has to be as strong to us as the last one. So hopefully we've achieved that. And
what about Wildside? Because that was the first single last year, and from all I can gather, it probably did receive quite a bit of airplay. I mean, that's maybe a slight departure. It's a real in-your-face rocker, isn't it? It's a fantastic track. How did that one come about?
It's funny because the one thing we didn't want to do as the first track that people had heard in like 12 years was put a
sugary
ballad, lame AOR ballad out, because it would be like, oh, here we go, same old stuff, So we thought maybe a real hard-hitting track was the way to go.
Capture people's attention.
Yeah, and whether that's well received or not really didn't come into play. We just didn't want to create an impression that we were going to come back as, some sugary AOR band, because we're not. So that's not what we're about, and so I think it did what we wanted it to do. There were a few people who said, this is not what we expected, and it was a bit like, it's not like the sort of, it's not like American Girls, it's not like that girl, but on the whole, it was really well received, and people were surprised by it, like you just said,
Fantastic,
which was great because it makes people take notice.
Get ready to rock radio. Music you want to hear.
Now, Jim came into the band probably about a couple of years ago, wasn't it? I think you appeared
2
in
years,
Firefest, didn't you?
Yeah,
last year.
Yeah, it's probably about, it's nearly getting on for 2 years,
Yeah, it's
18
gotta be.
months, 2
Yeah.
years
So
since I
you-
first came to have a play with the band. Anyway,
Right, and you've been witness really to the whole evolution of the album. I mean, did you have songs written before Jim?
No,
Only a couple really, didn't you?
Really early
which
ones,
has sort of changed
Yeah.
from what they were then, yeah.
No, it's all come from when Jim came in the band. I mean, to be honest with you, if I told the truth, Jim gave us a kick up the backside. He's younger. He's got, we are quite, we've done this, so we're quite set in our ways. And I think Jim maybe introduced us to doing things slightly different. He's definitely had a massive influence on the way the album turned out, without a doubt. So, haven't you, Jim?
I wrote all of it, music, words and produced it. But don't tell anyone that's off the record.
Now, Jim, you were obviously a fan, weren't you, I think, of FM?
Yeah.
Although, age-wise, you must have been quite young. I mean, when you first started buying records, I can't believe you were buying FM records, were you?
Well, yeah.
They were in your collection, weren't they?
I had a couple in the collection. I'm still only in the previous decade to Steve at the moment. Not for long. But he's in his 40s, I'm in my 30s, that's what I'm saying. But, I was at school, really, when they were coming out. And I used to go into a local record shop, and there was a guy who worked there, and I used to go in and ask his advice on what I should buy. And one of them being Indiscreet, and this guy, whose name's Paul, he worked for the band for a bit, didn't he?
He did merchandising,
And we've seen him at a couple of the gigs, and he used to go on about FM all the time to me, go on about Steve Overland, and said I should buy some of it, So I bought a few albums with these dodgy hairstyles on, and sort of, I mean, for a while, I did play it. I mean, you get into other things, and in all honesty, didn't play it for a long, long time, actually. And it was only when I found out later, me and Steve were sort of neighbours, it used to, after nights in the pub, me and a few mates would go back home and we'd get the vinyl collection out. And we used to have a bit of a laugh at it, really.
Yeah. I don't blame you.
But the songs were always there. I mean, I think that was the thing, really. The songs were there. The hairstyles haven't stood the test of time. But yeah.
But there was something there that you related to.
Oh yeah, totally, yeah. And just being a big music fan and obviously pretty much working in music since I was 16 years old, I always knew about Steve and his name and his reputation, just as you do, really.
Yeah. So how did the two of you get together finally then?
Just by accident, one Christmas Eve in the local pub. I mean, I'd known about Jim for a long time. People kept saying, you got to hear this great guitar player in the village. And as I say, me and my brother, there's a carnival in the village every year, and it rained really heavy one year. My brother was staying with me, Chris, who was the original guitarist in the band, as you know. And we walked in the local pub, and Jim was, a much younger Jim was there with the Rory Gallagher hairstyle, and my brother just stood there really quietly, said, I won't tell you exactly what he said on the but he said, he's absolutely brilliant, this lad, isn't he? And I said, yeah, he is good, isn't he? And I'd never heard him. I didn't even know it was Jim then. It was just this lad with a band doing Hendrix and all this kind of stuff, and it was just brilliant. Went away probably 5 years on, after everybody saying you should meet each other and dee. We bumped into each other in the pub Christmas Eve, and we've been mates ever since, really. Long before Jim joined FM, it was just we just did stuff together before then, writing and things like that,
Programmed by enthusiasts, not accountants. This is Get Ready to Rock Radio.
After FM stopped making records, Steve, in the mid-90s, 1995-ish, you didn't exactly hang around because you've been extremely busy, haven't you, over the last decade?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a bit of everything. I've done, from ads to everything. It's just the thing with the music industry is that you got to basically do many things to keep it interesting, and also to make a living. It's not an easy way to make a living, but it's so I did a few things for various producers, and I met up with I did a session with Steve Morris, the guy from Gillan, and he's doing something with Gillan now, but he's also in a band called Heartland for many years. And I did a session, and the record company guy came down from Escape, did the session, and came to me after that and said, would you be interested in putting a project together with Steve? So we did. We got Chris and Harry James and Thunder, put Shadow Man together and did one album. It was really well received, and I think I've just finished writing album number 4, so we're in the studio in May doing that. Same lineup, Chris and Harry and Thunder, and me and Steve. And I just think I'll just do a bit of everything. From me and Jim have done stuff for country stuff and sent it out to the States to people, and we've done all sorts of different styles. I think that's what keeps it fresh.
Yes.
To be pigeonholed doing one thing, you can easily get bored, and you also get pigeonholed as that's what you do, and so I like to do a bit of everything, really. And making these albums with various different musicians. The Overland albums are largely made with Scandinavian musicians and producers,
which of course is a great place at the moment.
Unbelievable,
been, hasn't it, for melodic rock
and their playing is just unbelievable. They're virtuoso players. They're fantastic. I mean, on the Overland album, I had Greg Bissonette from Dolly, and some great players on the records, but they approach things totally differently. And I mean, Jim sort of did a bit of work on the first Overland album with Anders, the producer, and he's like a genius. This Swedish guy, Anders Rindheim, he's just fantastic. So I went out to Sweden to do the album. He's got his own studio out there, and it's just great to work with different people because everybody works in a different way, whether you're writing songs with them or recording or whatever. So you learn something every time you do it. So it keeps you fresh, keeps you on your toes, because if people are giving you can get set in your ways. If everything you do it your way.
Yes. You
get set in your ways. So you have to have new challenges, and I love it. I love doing all the different projects.
Well, talking about different countries, I mean, FM. Where would you say outside of the UK the biggest market was? I mean, did you have any success in Scandinavia?
Oh, big, yeah. I mean, we went out there. The first 2 albums were really, really popular. Did really well. We toured with Europe out there when they were at the height. So that's the biggest band apart from ABBA you could have toured with in Scandinavia. So that was like being on tour with the Beatles out there at the time. It was just like screaming. You couldn't really hear very much when you played, but fantastic,
The new album's doing well in Sweden, isn't it? Sort of better than anywhere else, really. European-wise.
Still lots of fans in Scandinavia.
I was going to say, because it's one of those strange, you'll know better than most, Steve, about Scandinavia. I'm wondering whether they produce all these melodic hard rock bands, and yet perhaps the market in Sweden, which is going to be smaller anyway, then maybe they're not as big in their homeland as they are outside.
No, I mean, there's the Heat, this new Scandinavian band that are doing very well. And it was quite a compliment, actually. They did the Firefest the night before, and they asked if they could stay over and meet us. So I'm standing there, and these 2 young sort of guys come up to me and say, Steve, you are one of our biggest influences. And they must have been about 6 when we were going the first time around. And it's like, but it's a real compliment, that to them, I mean, they're doing really well out in Sweden now. They're like the new Europe, really, and absolutely fantastic that they took FM, one of their biggest influences, when they started, which is fantastic. It gives you a bit of a kick, really.
It must be marvellous that people are coming up to you like that, and
that was fantastic.
Their music. I mean, it's a real bonus.
No, it's superb. Makes you, it makes it all worthwhile. Really, makes you feel good.
Get ready to rock radio.
Let's come right up to date, really, with FM returning at Firefest in 2007. Now, what was going on round about that time? Because that really sparked off the reformation of the band, didn't it? Did you need some persuading, really?
Oh, years of persuading. I mean, ask him. I used to see him in the pub. We go out because we've been.
I used to say, "Yeah, we're going to put that band back together."
I'd be like, "Not a chance."
I tell you what,
Like some old guitar, isn't it?
Yeah.
All chance of black fog, you said to me,
yeah. No, I was always like not that interested, to be honest, because I've always been somebody. I mean, I tend to look forward and not go back to what I've done before. But if you want the truth be known, it was like. The guy, the organiser of the Firefest, Kieran, he's a great lad, and he also runs the Fireworks magazine with Bruce and all that kind of thing. And he kept saying to me, "Would you not do one show, just one show?" And I'm like, "No, Kieran, everybody's all over the Andy lives in Malta, and to get it back together would be a real pain." If you want the truth, he kept putting the fee up, and it kept getting more and more, and he kept saying. And I was doing some writing for some stuff in the States with Merv, a bass player in FM. And I mentioned it to Merv. I was just around there one afternoon, we were working on a song, and I said, this guy Kieran keeps saying, I've just done an interview with him for the last Shadow Man record, and he said he keeps banging on about us headlining this festival he does called the Firefest. And I said, and he's offered this much money, and I said, do you think if we're ever going to do a one-off show together again and get it all back together, we're going to have to do it soon? Otherwise we'll be in an old people's home. So I said, if we're ever going to do it, let's get back together and see what you think. To ask the other guys. And they're like, yeah, let's just do one gig, see how it goes. And to be honest, Dave, we didn't expect anything like the response we got. We were totally moved by the whole thing, to be honest. Walked out, gigs sold out, people from Bermuda, Japan.
Nantwich,
and it really was quite overwhelming.
Yes.
And when we saw that, it was a bit like, well, we can't just do one gig, because afterwards we had the after show meet and greet thing, and all the fans are like, you can't stop again, and you actually felt quite moved by it, and they so we decided we were going to carry on and see what happened. In the meantime, Andy was we decided if we were going to do it, it needed 100% commitment. If we're going to come back, we've got to come back better than we were, and we've got to make an album that's better than what we've ever done in our minds. We've got to totally believe in it. And Andy was kind of doing a couple of other things, talking about moving to the States, going to Canada, and was hard to pin down, and so that was when it was decided that maybe it would be best if we were going to carry on, if Andy wasn't involved, and it was just a mutual thing, really. It was a natural thing that just happened. He was living in Malta, so doing 2 rehearsals to do something was a big deal to get together, and that's what happened, really. So we it was all a big surprise, and then it all steamed. Jim came down, we were going to do another gig and maybe start writing some songs, and we tried a few guitarists out, and I knew Jim, it was whether Jim wanted to do it, really. I mean, Jim is 10 years plus younger than me, and I was working with Jim anyway, and I said, do you fancy coming down? And we tried a few other people out, and I knew he'd be brilliant. I mean, I know how he plays, and he came down, and to be honest, didn't surprise me. He blew all the rest of the people we'd tried out the water, really. And the rest of
all the other guitarists had no fingers.
No, and Merv is one of these people. He tapes everything you do. You can't, if you're sitting down like this with an acoustic guitar in the break having a cup of coffee, Merv will have a tape machine on.
Yeah.
And he recorded all the guitar players that did the audition, and he just said, he speaks for himself, and everybody's always sort of harked back to the way my brother used to play with the band. And the melodic, he's a very melodic guitar player, quite bluesy, but also very melodic. Jim has come in now and taken that a step further, but bringing that back into the band, and I think the fans, they love it, don't they? I mean, Jim came in and did... when you came in and did the first show, he said, I'm going to play some of Chris's stuff. Because
play the solos like he did them, which I think is one of the things that a lot of the fans liked it, really, and probably disliked about Andy Barnett being in the band, and that's not knocking Andy's playing, because Andy's a pretty amazing guitar player, really,
but he did split the fan base a little bit.
Yeah, massively. And the thing is, there's no point for me to come into a band that's so well established and has such a big fan base and say, I'm going to do this to it and make it sound like this. No one's really interested in me doing that, and I'm not interested in doing that.
Exactly.
I just wanted it to sound like people remember it. I wanted people to come back and say, well, I haven't been to an FM show for 20 years. And, you know, when they hear that girl, hear the solo played nearly correctly. But you know what I mean. That's how they want to hear it. They don't want to hear someone else's interpretation of it. And so many of Chris's guitar solos were melodic written parts, like Brian May plays on Queen records. You can't change those guitar solos. And your brother's solos are very much like that. You know?
Yeah. And so are Jim's. So it's basically brought that element back to the band.
Yes.
And where Jim is very much, you know, he's a song person. I mean, Jim's the only brilliant guitar player I've ever known that made a solo album and hardly had any guitar solos on it. You know, it's like, you know, so I'm like, yeah, it's really good, Jim, but you don't actually play much guitar on this, do you? You know, and it's
yeah, but he wants to.
But that's he's a song person, David.
Yes.
So
song driven.
what basically fits the song and what complements the melody of the song is what Jim does. It's not all about him, which a lot, you know, it's a great thing to be able to have a 20-second slot in a song. So you play a solo, you got 20-25 seconds, and you've got to get your bit, get your bit across. And he's great at it, you know, and it works. So if you do one of the songs off the new album, if you play a different solo, it just won't sound right. It's like, all right, now do that song and play a different solo to Kosov, and it will sound ridiculous, you know. And it's just great melodies, and they're more like parts as much as guitar solos, you know.
Do you see that evolving at all within the band? The sort of because you play guitar, of course, don't you, Steve? And you've always done that.
Yeah.
So, and there are nice harmonies on the album.
Well, that's one of the elements that me and Jim talked about bringing back into the band. It disappeared. It disappeared on the third and maybe, well, even the fourth album, and people were saying, you know, what happened to all the twin lead stuff, like the Thin Lizzy kind of Brian May stuff you used to do? And it disappeared. So.
And that's such a big part of the first couple of records,
it is,
which people associate with the band, which is why, you know, tracks like Over You have got that great, well, I say great, but I know, but well, he wrote it, I can say it was great, but you know, that great sort of Thin Lizzy twin lead all the way through it, really, and so many people have picked up on that.
They have, and people aren't doing that anymore. You know, all the bands that used to do that have stopped doing it. So it was an element of the band that we thought, we'll bring it back, and you know, it works great within this band. So we're going to do it more and more. And Jim's stuff has got a lot of harmonies. He's a big Brian May fan. There's a lot of that kind of orchestration. You know, guitar stuff that's happening on the record, which I love, and so do the people, so do the fans, obviously. You know?
I mean, I was well aware of that when you did the showcase at the Roadhouse in Covent Garden, London. I mean, that was a great gig, really.
Yeah, it was fun, wasn't it?
You know, all credit to you, really. You've come back, and I know you've been back previously at Firefest, but it was a nice gig to do that, really, to launch the album.
Oh, it was great because it's more like a party atmosphere. And you know, the thing is with us, I mean, so far the band's not even close to what it will be, because every gig we've done, we've had a 6-month break. We do a show, sell it out, have 6 months off, and then do another one. You know, so when we actually get on this tour and we're playing every night and it all gels, and it takes tours really to make bands gel, and that's what we need now. You know, and I think when we start doing that, I mean, there's quite a lot of plans for this year and next year already. I think the band will really, really come into its own. I really do. I think it's the best lineup we've ever had by far.
Oh, it's excellent hearing you say that, really. Which brings me to my final comments, really, about you've got a tour coming up in May. You've got some more dates in July. So will there be anything else later in the year?
There will be. There's big plans for later in the year, but we can't basically say what it is yet. It's 99.9% there. But we haven't signed the contract yet. So if I said it and it doesn't happen, we've had a whole catalogue saying, yeah, we're doing that, you know, and then people say, well, you didn't, did you? You know, so, you know, but there's lots of things are in the pipeline, David, and lots more really gigs and lots of other stuff. We're starting writing the new album, aren't we? Because obviously we're going to have to find a slot to do that in between all the other stuff. So lots is going to happen. You know,
right.
Definitely.
Which brings us to our final track, and we thank you, Steve and Jim, for your time this afternoon. It's been really enjoyable, actually, listening to you recounting events, you know, 20 odd years ago, 30 years ago. We're going to finish with Unbreakable, which is almost like you could say that about the band's spirit, really. It is unbreakable, isn't it? Very cliche, but
You should see us sometimes.
my thanks to you and good luck with the gigs in
Thank
May
you very
and
much.
July.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.